Welcome to the IME Community Podcast, where self-love is your superpower to achieve your weight and life goals and make your mark in the world. Your host is Dr. Karla, activist, MD. If you're a teen who's looking to revolutionize your health and can't wait to follow your dreams, welcome to the IME community.
Welcome to the IME Community Podcast. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited to have our first guest, Peter Allman, who I've known for a long time. He's an amazing mentor and support and community visionary in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Pete and I have been friends and intersected for a long time. And
correct.
Yep, and Pete's a therapist. And he's written an amazing book called Thoughts, the Power of Your Mind. And I thought it would be so amazing to have Pete come on and talk about his book, teach us all about his work, why he wrote the book, and what he's finding out since he launched the book. And at the end of the podcast, we'll definitely let Pete know where we can all go online and get the book. And also, the other cool thing about Pete is that he's a co-founder of an amazing organization called Lighthouse in our community that does amazing work for children, families, and our whole community. And so we'll talk a little bit about Lighthouse too. And we'll talk about and ask Pete how we can support Lighthouse moving forward. So Pete, I'm just going to have you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll get into your book.
Great. Thank you, Karla, for having me on your show. I'll try to make my story short. After college, I went into our family business, and a weird thing happened when I turned 30. I was sitting in my office thinking, I'm an adult. Do I want to do this the rest of my life? Which is kind of a weird deal. And the answer was quickly no. So I took the summer of 1988 and volunteered at a place called Covenant House in New York City, a place for runaways. They called them throwaways. And Karla, I had an amazing time, and they trusted me. And I even went on the teenage outreach van to bring in teenage prostitutes from midnight to 6 a.m. So came back to Lincoln and thought, that was just an end in itself. But people thought it was weird that a white middle-class kid went to inner city New York. So you know how civic clubs and churches are always looking for speakers. So I talked about Covenant House. And it was consistently afterwards, people said, Pete, there's a need in Lincoln. Well, I grew up in Lincoln and obviously very sheltered, but I thought, really? And so I heard it enough that my wife, Maureen, and our friend, James Perry, we started researching the need because we didn't want to duplicate any services. And what came back was, after a formal needs assessment, Lincoln needs an after-school program for its teens. So I could get into that, but I won't right now, of why that's important. But Lighthouse just took off. I mean, there is a need. And so I left the family business, went back on my master's in counseling. So I have a half-time private counseling practice and I'm half-time Lighthouse. And then I found a hobby in my adulthood is I like writing.
Awesome. So you've been a therapist for how long?
24, 25 years.
Yeah. And so you've been working with teens and their parents and...
Yeah, through Lighthouse, now this is our 31st year. Mm-hmm. And my private practice initially was teens and families, because, that's how people knew me through Lighthouse. But now it's predominantly mostly adults. And I didn't change any marketing, it just kind of evolved. So I love working with teenagers on up.
So tell us why you wrote the book. Tell us about your amazing book, Thoughts, the Power of Your Mind.
Yeah, well, I'm in a writer's group. And which is really good because that's accountability. It keeps you writing.
Yeah.
And I had just finished another book called Shrink Proof Your Life, Top 10 Ways to Stay Off the Therapist's Couch. And that took off and did well too. But then I got to come up with something new. In the back of my mind, I knew that, your thoughts create your reality. I knew with that thought, that theme, really there's nothing new under the sun. Buddha said it, BC, Socrates said it, Jesus said it, and modern day psychologists say it. So I thought, it might be a good book to get theologians, philosophers, scientists, psychologists, and get good provocative quotes that around that theme of your thoughts create your reality. And I thought, how about A to Z? And I found them and I wrote about them and I came up with, counseling sessions to kind of illuminate more of the truth, and then kind of some working steps at the end. And Karla, and it really took off.
That's awesome. And also I'm going to add life coaches into that too, because that's what we use is the thought model or thought cascade or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of the basis too of that your current thinking creates your current result, your current reality. And so tell us a little bit more about, so your quotes were like, your first one is from, can you tell us?
Oh, you bet. And it really worked out.
By Aristotle.
Yeah, it really worked out well because, and Aristotle's quote is, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." And I'm really lucky that that's the first chapter, because to be able to do this work, you have to see your thoughts. And for most of us, thoughts and us are like paint against a wall. I mean, we think that's the wall, but it really isn't. And then you got to separate yourself from the thought and see it and say, is that a functional, productive thought, or is that pretty dysfunctional and unproductive? And I have 3 truths through every chapter. And one of them is, you are not your thoughts, which in the Western world is pretty crazy. And people get kind of whacked out by that, say, well, what am I then? Which is a whole nother discussion. But you're not your thoughts. And, we have thousands of thoughts a day. And some of them are weird. Like, where'd that thought come from? And we're not our thoughts. So I say to people, thoughts are not the problem, because it is the nature of our mind to come up with thoughts. It's attaching or identifying and then acting out those thoughts could be the problem, or something very beautiful and productive. So just because you have a thought, just say it's just a thought. I mean, it's like a rainbow. It comes and it goes, and the conditions have to be right for it, and the conditions have to be right for thoughts to arise. But you don't have to attach and identify. You can let go of thoughts and then say, well, what would be a nicer thought or a more productive thought? Come up with that and then behave that way.
And it's not as easy as that, is it, for people either, especially like when you're my age and you start doing, like when I started doing like the life coaching and learning about this and then reading your book, it's like, it's kind of powerful, the awareness is, but you can't just simply do what we call in kind of life coach world, like a thought swap, where you just trade it for a more positive, intentional thought. Yeah.
Oh yeah. This takes a lot of practice, even though once you start it, I think it can move pretty quickly, because then you kind of get it. Like, oh, there's that reoccurring thought. I'm not going to do that anymore, because whatever, that doesn't help my marriage, or that doesn't help my work environment. And I'm going to let go of it, because, if they're listening to you or reading this book, Karla, they're probably on a journey.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you're on a journey. Guess what? You got life lessons. And this is a biggie, because it's so prevalent.
Right. And the other thing is, like, you described it as a rainbow, which I really love, because I haven't heard that. But, also like just thinking of it as a sentence in your mind. And that some of those pathways are almost like, and you talk about this in your book, that a really powerful thought that's on a loop that we have chosen to believe is true over time and time again is a belief. And in our society, we are not typically used to challenging beliefs.
I really like that, because also I think in the Western culture, so much is reinforced about the external world, achievement and accumulation and travel. And what you're working with and what I'm working with is having people go internal, because the thoughts are internal, and get some insights this way instead of this way.
Yeah.
And so a belief is just a bunch of thoughts.
And so how do you describe your 3 truths? Can you go through those and describe those for us?
You bet. Number 1, your thoughts create your reality. I mean, that's kind of the biggie. Number 2, and this is also, I mean, they're all biggies. This is also one that I remember when I learned, I'm like, seriously? So the second truth throughout every chapter is there is no reality outside your interpretation of it.
I think that one is so profound. And even as like a life coach and somebody who's been doing this work, and on a daily basis, I even thought that was, wow, so profound. And can you describe that a little bit more? Explain that?
Yeah, well, something as easy as, or simple as, you and I meet someone downtown and we hold a little 3 or 5 minute discussion. Then you and I leave and I say, kind of separately with you, well, that guy isn't the nicest guy ever. Or maybe I use a choicer word. And you say, I thought he was a good guy. Same experience, but 2 different interpretations, 2 different realities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people get that because that happens, but it's in everything that we all construe our reality. And with growth and healing, usually we construe a new reality on the same circumstance, which then becomes a healthier way of being with that circumstance.
Great. And so tell us your 3rd truth.
And the 3rd truth is you are not your thoughts.
Yeah. And I think that is, like you said, how we attach to those thoughts and we get so stuck in that. That is so powerful to know that you are not your thoughts, and what a relief it is.
Absolutely. That's freedom, Karla. Because really, I mean, again, in our culture, we're taught what you accomplish today, multitask, get a lot of things going on. And then you ask somebody, how you doing? Busy. Oh, I'm busy too. And all that stuff's reinforced. And then the thoughts are like paint against the wall. You don't even see them. You're just doing. And so this is slowing down, realizing they're just merely thoughts, not buying into them, and then really creating a healthier, happier life.
Yeah, that's so great. And I think one of the things that you really enforce here at the end of each chapter is the reflections that you're encouraging us to do. And that's really the work that has to happen, because it's not like some sort of arrival point. We're always going to have thoughts that are coming up, and we can either say that's a sentence, or like you say, a rainbow, or sometimes I say like some sort of mindfulness practices talk about like just noting that's just a cloud going by. There's nothing going wrong here, but there's no like arrival point or summit. It's just really the daily intentional practice, which is what I love about your book, where you have all of the reflections at the end of each chapter. So
yeah, because a lot of, you said the right word, a lot of practices at the end of each chapter, because a lot of people in my private practice, they'll say, oh, this is going to be hard. I say, please don't say it's going to be hard. Just say it's going to be a practice. Because if you say it's going to be hard, what's it always going to be?
Yeah,
hard.
That's just a thought.
Yeah, exactly. So, I say, if you want to get better at bowling, what are you going to do? And they say, practice bowling. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to say that's hard. And so change your thought from hard to it's going to be a practice. And with practices, guess what? We just get incrementally better.
And you get to choose your thoughts.
Yeah.
That serve you. And and like you said, like it's just a practice of starting to become unstuck and unattached from your thoughts.
Yeah.
And letting them go. And do you have any like mindfulness practices that you do or that you work with your clients that help them? Like sometimes I have an amazing life and well-being coach. She's also a therapist, which is awesome. But she talks about my mind being like a snow globe mind. So
Oh, yeah.
like which I'm like, yeah, it's awesome in some ways, but there's other times when, I need to just calm down and and get centered. And
Yeah.
so do you have any ideas for how, like, if somebody is really like stuck in life and they just can't come up with what is that thought or belief that is keeping me stuck?
Mm-hmm. In the book, we talked about this also before we went on air. I believe the progression of how we humans operate is everything starts with a thought, and the thoughts create a feeling. And with these two pieces of information, then we do a behavior. Yep. And so a lot of people aren't aware of their thoughts because of what we talked about, but they're aware of their feelings. So my strategy is really the purpose of feelings are messengers. Meaning, what's the message of that anger? What's the message of why you're embarrassed? What's the message of why you're all of a sudden anxious? And so then they work themselves up to the thought, oh, because I get mad when my dad says whatever. Okay, so what's the message? What's the life lesson of how to respond? What's the new thought you can have in responding to that person, your dad? And so it slows them down. They don't act out of anger. And then they're kind of like the scientist of like, okay, what's the thought that's creating that anger? And then again, slowly, incrementally, making changes.
So being kind of like a curious observer of your mind and just having some self-discovery and awareness and kind of sitting like on the couch with you, right?
I love that language, Karla.
Yeah.
Curious observer. Right on.
Yeah. Since if you're not your thoughts and you're not your mind, I mean, it's a part of you, but you can sit back and be curious and say, oh, that's what's coming up for me. And that doesn't serve me. And then that helps you to just creating the pause and the awareness, I think, is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think too, with the emotions, we're not used to processing our emotions, especially painful ones.
True.
May kind of trigger us, and we don't since we don't realize that they come from our thoughts. Oftentimes, it will just present, like you say, as a messenger. Like it'll come up maybe viscerally in your body as some sort of it's a sensation in your body.
Yep.
And we can't always help that, but sometimes when is it not helpful to sit and figure out exactly where that's coming from? Sometimes you go down like a kind of a thought, like paralysis analysis, or ride that thought train and versus just like feeling that emotion, letting it pass through.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer completely, but sometimes in my practice, people say, well, why am I that way? And I said, we could spend some time on that and go back to childhood, figure it out. But I don't know if that's as important as you now have the aha that one of your buttons is dad saying X. So let's do it present tense and say, okay, what's the healing that's got to be done, and figuring out how to depower that anger and come up with a healthy thought. And also, if your dad's not going to change, maybe you got to distance yourself a little bit. I mean, if you're an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really hard for us is, we were talking about this with like the achievements and kind of looking at our action or behavior line for how we're going to feel or think we're going to feel. But it's so powerful to know that it's your thought that creates your feelings and your results and your actions and your results, because then that means that you can start thinking in a way intentionally on purpose that really serves you and will move you to how you want to feel and where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And what it also does is when one embraces this and practices this, now there's no longer any victimhood stuff going on. That you're only a victim if you give too much power to that external circumstance. Because one of the things that I say often, which we got to talk about a lot, is circumstances don't make the person; they reveal the person. So one of my favorite Far Side cartoons is two robots are sitting in a therapist's office, and one of the robots has tons of buttons on him. And the therapist said, well, if you didn't have so many buttons, she wouldn't be able to make you so mad. The reason I like that is because it's always about us. That reveals that person we met downtown, I thought was not a nice guy. That's about me. That's a button I have. You didn't have that button. So circumstances always reveal you. Where we always think, no, objectively, that guy was a butt. No. That means you have an issue with whatever that gal represents. So no more victimhood. It's all about empowerment, changing your thoughts, and creating a new reality.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think about like circumstances too, as kind of in the life coach where we think about it being like these are just things that are out of our control. I mean, you can prove them. There may be, with my work, it's a lot about like the weight. We think that it's just a measurement on a scale that may be triggering a feeling and our action or results. And if I was, if that was a different measure, then I would be showing up in a different way. But it's the thought that you have about that measure. And that is so profound. And do you find that as you were talking about like getting rid of the victim and the blaming thing, because it's just not even possible once you own your own thoughts and that they create your current reality, it's hard for people like my age who have been in that patterning, especially for a really long time, to own that it's our thoughts that create our reality, to let go of that patterning of being and victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, if they're showing up to talk with you or showing up to talk with me, they've already said, my method's not working. So they're more open. So it's not going to be as hard. They're more open to a new way of living in the world, which is always this way first, seeing your thoughts. And you're right. Someone that's not open, they're going to be in that same rut and being stuck in so-and-so's doing that. And this isn't right. And how dare this? And look at the political system. And ran. And then they maybe drink a lot or play a lot of video games or, a lot of diversions to try to shut this down where we can shut it down and come up with healthier ways of being in the world without having to do those more unhealthy coping strategies.
And we call that like buffering, which you have something that's getting you out of feeling your negative emotion that's coming up or the discomfort, and then you have a net negative consequence. So whether it's buffering with food and not processing your emotions or owning it's your thoughts that are creating the current reality. And so, that's just helpful. How much is like awareness, just awareness is so powerful. And just to tell your clients, this is really what you need is just this awareness. Yeah.
In fact, I say to people, once you get the awareness, you're 50% of the way there. And the other 50% is new thoughts, new practices. So I completely agree with you. So much is awareness.
That's great. So one of the things I notice when I'm coaching teens is that they get it like right away. And it's almost like they get that your thoughts create your results and your current reality. And they'll say, time and time again, they'll say, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that scene in Nemo at the end where all the fish are in like the bags in the ocean and they've escaped and they're all like looking at each other like, now what? And so how do you help your clients create new thoughts?
Okay. Well, one of the things which is always jarring to them, but I do it very purposefully because they need to be jarred, is saying, do you really want to change? And they're like, of course I do. I'm like, well, you haven't changed the last 2 weeks, and we've been talking about this. So I'm not passing judgment. Do you really want to change?
Yeah.
And that has to be a component. You have to be open to living in the world a different way. And so once they admit, yeah, I really do want to change, then we kind of maybe role play. I say, okay, I'll be your boss. And then you have to come up with new thoughts and new ways of acting and behaving toward me. Because, let's say he's been complaining about his boss for weeks and weeks. So I kind of know his boss. So I play it pretty well. And I try to hit every button on him, on that robot. And they smile because they see what I'm doing. And sometimes it takes them 3 or 4 or 5 seconds to come up with a new thought. And at the very end, I say, okay, who won the discussion? And if I won as the boss, then we got to keep role playing, coming up with new thoughts. So it becomes easier. If they won, I say, fantastic. You're ready to go live this in the world.
That's awesome. I could be there all day with you if that was the case. That's awesome. I love in your book, you have so many amazing examples of your clients and their families. And there was one, and I'm going to ask you to share a little bit more about it. There was a teen son, I think, or maybe he was in college, and the parents had divergent approaches to him. I think the dad was stricter and the mom was more passive, and you drew a circle. You said, you're here, mom, and here's where you need to be.
Yeah. So the reason I share that, and that's a real deal, is because everything is seeking balance in life. Nature seeks balance. We seek balance. If we're really high strung, alcohol is a relaxant. So that, we think it's going to help us create balance. So I'll start with the mom. If the mom is too lax, the kid's acting out, the dad unconsciously thinks it's got to be overly strict. And it just doesn't work when people are living at the ends of the continuum. Mm-hmm. So I said to the dad, if mom tightened up a little bit and gave a consequence or asked for what she needed, Dad, what would you do? He goes, well, I'd lighten up. And so I said, okay, now you have a practice, a new way of thinking, of being in the world, and now go practice that. And then we'll come back in a week or two and see how you guys are doing.
And their result, where they weren't really getting anywhere with their son, not that we can control the outcomes or anyone else's actions, especially with teens, we don't cause control, but how they were deciding to show up was really based on just their current thinking.
Correct. And it goes back to your very first subject. They were not aware of their thinking. Yeah. They were living kind of unconscious lives. Well, I'm super relaxed with him because Dad's really strict. No, I'm strict because you're lax. I'm like, wow, you guys haven't talked. You haven't made your thoughts conscious and then work with them and come toward the middle.
And they think, if only my son behaved in this way, then we wouldn't have any problems. Or if only my wife or my husband showed up in this way. And that's just living on that kind of circumstance line.
Correct.
We're just always moving the goalpost on ourselves and trying to manipulate our lives in that way. And it's just kind of out of touch with reality too. It's very freeing to think this is a great thought I'm having that's serving me, that it's so freeing to think that it's just our thoughts that we can think on purpose intentionally and create new beliefs that serve us. And it's unlimited potential. You unlock that power of your mind, which is the title of your book, Thoughts, the Power of Your Mind.
Yeah. Well, and that's why life coaches are needed, therapists are needed, support groups are needed, friends are needed, because some of us get in such a line of thinking, we don't know what would be a new way to think because you only know this. Uh-huh. And so with another mom saying, well, I would do X, oh, wow, thank you. I never thought of it that way. or a life coach or a therapist saying, have you thought about it this way? Well, no, they hadn't, because, they're on that rut. And then, the Einstein quote, which is really an Al-Anon quote, is you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah. It's like, I can show you why you're stuck. It's like your client who was not interested in changing, or you thought, and there's no problem. Like, there's never any problem. You get to choose. And the more that they have the power of the choice and the power of creating that awareness and intentionally creating those thoughts that serve themselves, the more power they will keep unlocking. It becomes easier and easier over time.
Yep. You got it.
Yeah. So what I love about you and I's work, and we intersect on a lot of levels as like community visionaries, but also like the power of working in a compassionate way with connecting one-on-one with individuals, which is why I created IME, because when you say the letters, I am me. And so you have the power of the individual along with the support of the community. And so I really think, Pete, your work has been so amazing as you work, one-on-one with your clients and writing this book, getting it into individuals' hands. It's so powerful. And then also your community work with Lighthouse. So you had the amazing experience in New York that summer. But can you tell us a little bit more about Lighthouse, how we can support it, but also, like as co-founder, like what was your intentional vision as you co-founded Lighthouse?
Yeah. Can I go back to what you said just before that, when you gave out all those compliments? Another thing which I have not shared is the outside world is always showing you. So, for instance, downtown, that guy showed me. I had an issue. Showed you. You were copacetic with him. So you just reflected to me the things that you like about me. Well, Karla, all that's in you, or else that wouldn't resonate with you. So thank you for being interested in being a thought leader and a community visionary and all the work you do, because what resonates in you is you. And so I just thought that's a good example of the world is always showing you. People think of it in negative ways, but it's also in positive ways.
Yeah. And I think, when you and I met, it was over a year ago for coffee, pre-COVID, for sure. I don't even know that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I had just gone through a really super traumatic career transition. And I just wanted people holding space for me, for my story. It was so helpful. And I remember you saying I'm so sad, that happened. And I'm also, I told you about I didn't have the name, IME community, that I was becoming a life coach. I was going back to my original vision as founder of Teach a Kid to Fish, creating community solutions for children's health, which is now my vision is create community. And you said, I'm just so glad that you're moving forward in this way. And so that was so helpful. And I just want to tell you I have tons of gratitude. But
Thank you.
So one thing I've learned over the last year or so is that your vision is always yours. It's never up for grabs. You can, like Brene Brown says, you're going to get your butt kicked. If you're out in the arena, if you put yourself in the arena, there's going to be things that are out of your control. But your vision is never up for grabs. And so I was just curious, you were tapped to launch Lighthouse. What that was like and what your vision was.
Yeah. I always have enjoyed working with adolescents, whether it's, when I was younger, my 20s in the church youth group, Wipeout, the boys group home. And so I read the book of the guy who started Covenant House, and it's working with adolescents in inner city. I thought that speaks to me. And so when I came back, like I said, people said there's a need. And so Covenant House was also an overnight place. And the needs assessment said, we don't need another overnight. We just need an after-school program, which I'm incredibly grateful. We're not a 24/7 operation. And so my vision was, I like helping people live to their potential. That was reflected to me when I was in college. Someone said that to me. I'm like, really? And people saw it in me before I saw it in myself. And adolescence is, I think, the ripe time for them to figure out who they are, because Eric Erickson says psychosocially, identity formation is the adolescent skill. So help adolescents figure out who they are, give them the strengths, give them the wherewithal, give them the belief that they can become successful young adults. And man, you can't explain anything more exciting to me than that. I mean, that is meaning and purpose to me compared to, what I was doing and what the family business was, which is nothing wrong with that, just person specific to me. Mm-hmm. So, number one, research shows that after school is the highest risk time period for teens. So it's a safe harbor, which, Lighthouse is a great metaphor for that. And then education's our number one goal, because we know, the trajectory of a kid who doesn't have a high school diploma. And well, every kid who comes to Lighthouse has to sign a pledge. I will graduate with at least 2.5. I will not get someone pregnant or get pregnant, because we know that trajectory makes it harder. And I will not get convicted of a crime, because we know the trajectory of kids who enter the juvenile justice system. Mm-hmm. So every kid signs that pledge. All of our programming goes to those three things. And we work with the team to help them stay more on that straight and narrow and graduate and, launch their young adulthood.
It's amazing. Do you know how many teens you've helped over the years? And
well, literally thousands. We average between, with COVID it's now less, but we average between 600 and 700 different youth a year. And we're also at Southeast called Lighthouse, Southeast Nights, because after school programming is so doggone important. Kid goes home to an empty house. Well, let's invite friends over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's go to a convenience store, maybe shoplift. It's just really risky time period. So a lot of teens, and those aren't 700 new teens every year, because, the sophomores come back as juniors, et cetera. But I don't know the exact number, but thousands of thousands.
That's incredible. Congratulations. It's amazing work.
Thank you.
So, by the way, do you share your book with the teens that go to Lighthouse?
Well, the staff have all read it, and I have led them through a 4-week, in-house seminar, and then they work with it with their mentees, because each regular kid has a mentor to deal with those 3 pledges. So not necessarily to the kids, but to the staff, and then they work with the kids.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like teaching a kid to fish, right? Empowering with voice, which is, and also I love the community build that you've done. Lighthouse is a community, but there are all sorts of communities. And as soon as I opened up my mind to think outside of geography for community, then it just became amazing opportunity to really now start connecting with teens who are struggling with their weight and body image, which there are so many now, and there's really never been anything that's helpful. But the important thing is that I can get something to them that will work and provide that compassionate connection, which is what you're doing at Lighthouse. So
yeah, I like your language again, compassionate connection. That explains it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That's what it takes for change. It just takes somebody listening and believing in another person. That's certainly what has helped me in life. But we should think of ways that we can collaborate, IME community and Lighthouse, because I think it could be pretty fun. So.
I think it'd be fun too. We're all, funders are always looking at who you're collaborating with. So absolutely, Karla.
Yeah, it's so cool. So how can we get your book? You were telling me lulu.com. Give us some more specifics, and also on Amazon.
Yeah, Lulu is the publishing house, LULU. And so I that would be my preference, but a lot of people go through Amazon, .com, and both of those places. Once COVID lifts, I'll be doing probably some seminars in the community and talking about it, and hopefully selling books afterwards. And that's how I've done it with my previous books. So please read it, get it, come up with good questions, and we'll talk down the road.
That sounds awesome. So it's called Thoughts, the Power of Your Mind, Peter Allman, MA. And any ways that we can, as a community, for those of us in the community, support Lighthouse? tell us where to go, and what do you all have going on to either raise funding or exciting things happening in the near future?
You bet. And thank you for asking. Our website is lincolnlighthouse.org, O-R-G. There are many, on the banner, money buttons do. So obviously donating is a big part. If COVID wasn't going on, we always ask for volunteers, but it's just tougher now. But now I'll just talk about what's going on at Lighthouse. When the color was red with COVID, Lighthouse wasn't open. When it was orange, we couldn't do the after-school program part, but we did open up our gym we were an online remote learning center, which was super important because many kids don't learn well that way. No parents are home, so they're undisciplined. And, LPS in the previous quarter handed out the most Fs in their history last quarter. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense because it was remote learning.
Yeah, it's just not fun. I mean, the ones I'm coaching, it's not interesting. They're not motivated.
It's understandable. So our gym's been a remote learning center, and we've been helping lots of teens that way. So now that we're yellow, now the after school program's open, and we serve dinner, and we're open till 6. And then the summer will be our regular schedule, 2 to 9.
Okay.
And so hopefully, when we can all gather back together, we'll ask, have your friends make a meal, bring it in and serve it. Have your church group do it. Our church, First Plymouth, brings in Thanksgiving meal, and they love serving and getting to know the kids because our kids are really good kids.
Oh, yeah.
They're just from really tough beginnings and need some help and need some structure.
Yeah. And have unlimited potential to unlock the power of their mind to create any reality and any result that they want. So
there's a believer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. I drank the Kool-Aid a while ago. So anyway, Pete, thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful for your work. I'm so grateful for your book. I think it's amazing. I think everyone should go out and get it. And this was just the first podcast interview with you, but we'll be doing more for sure.
And Karla, thank you. And thanks for the work you're doing. And I think this was just great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the IME Community Podcast, where self-love is your superpower. The content of this podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Karla Lester and is not intended as, and shall not be understood as, a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions shared reflect the host and guest and do not represent an organization or medical group. Always seek the advice of your physician or therapist if you have concerns about your health. And please, like and subscribe to the IME Community Podcast. Share IME with your friends and go to imecommunity.com to join the member community. Don't forget to follow IME on social.